right, good evening and welcome to the Sandy Springs Transportation Master Plan virtual webinar. We appreciate your flexibility. We usually do these things in person, but we have moved to the virtual platform for the time being. So thank you again for your flexibility. My name is Caitlin Schenkel. I am the project manager here at Sandy Springs for this effort. Before we get into the presentation, I do want to orient you to the Zoom platform. Everyone is in listen-only mode. If you have a question, go to the bottom banner of your screen and you'll see a Q&A box. You can submit your questions there and we'll answer them during certain time points during the presentation. We are cognizant of everyone's time, and so we will keep this presentation to an hour. If there are any unanswered questions at the end of this, we will make sure to follow up afterwards. All right, in addition to the Q&A box, if you want to change your audio settings, also at the bottom banner towards the left-hand corner, you'll see a way that you can either call in or use your headphones for your devices. All right, without any further ado, I will go ahead and introduce our presenters today. We have Jessica Choi with Kinley Horn and Aaron Thorson with Gresham Smith, and they are our consultant team on this effort. Go ahead and take it away, Jessica.
All right, thank you so much, Caitlin, for the introduction. Again, thank you all so much for being with us today. We know the evening times are sacred with a lot of family dinners and whatnot. So again, thank you for spending your hour with us. We hope that we can make the content exciting and engaging for you all. So just a quick overview of what we're going to talk about today. We're going to give you a little bit of a kind of existing conditions background information regarding some of the data that we're seeing in Sandy Springs today, go through some preliminary project goals that have been established for the study, do a quick catchphrase activity. It's going to get you to kind of do a little bit of interactive activity with us. We're going to introduce the online survey that's also available for folks, and then discuss some preliminary next steps. And so, the first thing that we want to say is, there are a lot of things that are happening in Sandy Springs that's really exciting, whether that's citywide planning efforts or countywide planning efforts, or just thinking about kind of major infrastructure projects that might be happening. We want to consider all of these factors when it comes to the transportation master plan. And so, there's also overarching trends and policies and new things, new technologies that we're seeing happening in Metro Atlanta and across the nation, whether that's the introduction of scooters and e-bikes and Uber and Lyft, and also consideration for emerging technologies like connected and autonomous vehicles. So we think this is a great opportunity for Sandy Springs through the Transportation Master Plan to really look at all of the plans and the recommendations and the trends and things that are happening across the nation, and really come up with a city-specific list of priorities that will help your Sandy Springs staff as well as the city to really prioritize, the investments that are being made in transportation in the next 5, 10, 15 plus years. This is also really timely because the next 10 comprehensive plan, which is the land use plan for Sandy Springs, was actually completed just a few years ago. And so this is a great opportunity, again, to align the land use and transportation initiatives to really come up with a coordinated strategy for the future. So we wanted to give you a little bit of an update of the planning process. This is obviously a very simplified version of what all the components are, but it really starts to set a tone for the direction that we're heading. And so you'll see during the kind of February through May timeframe, we've largely completed the assessment looking at existing conditions in Sandy Springs. So that's really looking at some demographic information as well as the transportation infrastructure as it exists today. And we've stepped into what we're calling the multimodal assessment, which is where we start to assess what needs exist, what gaps there might be in the transportation network, as well as, just identifying some potential projects as we move forward that we want to consider. You'll see that we're engaging you all, the public, during the June-July timeframe, and we're actually hoping to come back to you all for additional feedback later this fall. Hopefully, it'll be back in person, but we'll remain flexible given the situation with COVID. And so we want to thank you all in advance for being patient and flexible with us. Like Caitlin mentioned, This is the first virtual public meeting that we're having for this effort. So, we, again, thank you for your time and your patience. So we're going to jump straight into some of the existing conditions reporting. So we've divided the existing conditions section of this presentation to give you more context about the city, starting with the people. And so that's really describing demographics and what the city looks like in terms of the residents that live here today. Then we're going to take you through some statistics about the employment, about what kind of jobs exist in the city, and the travel flows that we see of people commuting back and forth to their jobs. Then we'll look at land use and how the Next 10 plan helps to guide some of those transportation investments and guides our planning process. And then the last piece is the most important piece, and why we're all here today, is to talk about mobility within the transportation network and really introduce you all to the different types of modes and things we're thinking about as we move forward in the planning process. So the first slide here is population growth. And so we have 4 maps here starting in 1990 to 2018, where we see that the population of Sandy Springs grew by approximately 60%. As we look at population forecasts, we see that the city will still grow, but much slower than before. And so, when we look at these population growth statistics, we like to compare it to a larger geography. So in this case, when we look at Fulton County versus Sandy Springs, again, will be growing at a slower pace than the overall county. As we consider the population in Sandy Springs and look at transportation trends, we start to think about how demographics affect the way that people are traveling. So for instance, when we look at the aging population, although many folks may choose to drive today, the decisions to drive may change over time. And so we want to ensure that the quality of life of the aging population, as well as just the cohorts in general, continues to improve and remain, at least maintain itself. We have to start thinking about how the aging population may want to travel outside of driving themselves. And so whether that's offering, different types of transit options, better sidewalks or bicycle facilities, we really want to start to take that into account as we plan for Sandy Springs. And so you'll see here the aging population of Sandy Springs is concentrated in kind of the panhandle portion in the northern part of the county, just north of Dunwoody, as well as near the 285 corridor down in the southern portion of the county. Zero vehicle households in Sandy Springs account for approximately 3,000 households in the city. So that's about 1 in every 15 households. These can be households that choose to not own a vehicle, or really just can't afford to have a vehicle and don't have access to one. And so when we look at the concentrations of folks, we see that many of the households are actually living in proximity to the 4 MARTA stations in the southern portion of the county, but there are also areas coming up in the map towards north end, closer to Roswell, as well as the panhandle of Sandy Springs, looking closer to Gwinnett County. So education and income, this is not a surprise to you all who live in Sandy Springs, but Sandy Springs does have a very highly educated community where almost 2/3 of the residents over the age of 25 have completed a 4-year college degree or higher. And so when we start to correlate educational attainment with income, we're certainly seeing that relationship in Sandy Springs, but there's also in the spectrum of the population, almost 10% of Sandy Springs residents live under the poverty threshold. And so again, when we think about transportation and thinking about, making sure that we have equitable access across the city, we really want to make sure that we are looking at the spectrum of folks who have options and who may not have options, and making sure that we are able to try to accommodate for everybody's quality of life. This last demographic point before we go into employment is about renters and owners. And so when we look at the percentage of renters versus owners in Sandy Springs, it's actually split almost evenly between renters and owners. And so even from 2013 to 2018, we're seeing that number stay largely at that 50-50 split. I did want to mention here that Sandy Springs is conducting or will be conducting a housing assessment later this year to really start to understand this trend at a deeper level. So next, we're going to dive into employment. As many of you all know, Sandy Springs is a regional employment destination. There are a lot of jobs, particularly in the perimeter, kind of southern portion of the county, as well as Roswell Road, that folks are traveling to in order to get to jobs. And so when we look at kind of travel flows and movements that are happening in the city, we see that over 120,000 people work in the city of Sandy Springs but come from elsewhere. But we also see a significant travel movement from the city to other parts of Metro. And so we're actually able to dig in a little bit deeper into the geographic kind of where people are going in Metro Atlanta. So this map here shows where Sandy Springs workers live. So that's people who work in Sandy Springs and where they're coming from. And so again, we start to see there are concentrations of people who live and work in Sandy Springs, folks that are coming from Atlanta to the south, from Cobb County to North Fulton and Gwinnett. Again, reiterating that Sandy Springs really is a regional employment destination. Now, we also want to talk about where Sandy Springs residents are working. And again, the concentration of those who are both living and working exist, but we're seeing highlights across Metro Atlanta, really in, the employment centers that we know and all recognize, right? It's Midtown, it's downtown, Buckhead, Cumberland area. There's pockets in Gwinnett and of course, kind of up the 400 corridor to Alpharetta. And beyond. And so, this puts a lot of kind of thought, we have to put a lot of thought into our transportation network and how people are moving today and how, how employment will affect the transportation network and how we think about it moving forward into the future. So next we'll talk about land use. So like I mentioned earlier today, Sandy Springs in 2017 actually completed the Next 10 comprehensive plan. And so what that plan indicated was areas in Sandy Springs where the city would like to target higher intensity growth. And so you're seeing concentrations of non-residential activities largely along Roswell and 400 corridors, as well as some of the roadways that connect the two together, such as Abernathy. And so, again, the Transportation Master Plan is a great opportunity for the plan to take into consideration the land use plan and make sure that we can complement what's been indicated by the land use plan by the way that people want to be traveling to and from those areas. Okay, so I'm actually going to pass the baton off to my partner here, Erin. You give us just a few seconds to transition.
Great, thank you, Jessica. We're going to talk now a little bit about some of the mobility characteristics. And I think before we move on to that, we're going to actually just pause for a minute here to take a few questions, see if anyone has any questions on the topics that have been covered previously. So if you would, just if you do have a question, find that Q&A box at the bottom of your screen and go ahead and enter your question there. And then we'll respond to any questions that come in the next minute or two. Okay, it looks like we don't have any questions at this time. If you do come up with a question or have any as we move forward, feel free to enter those, and then we'll pause again after we get through the mobility section to answer questions at that time. So looking at the transportation network across the city, we see that there's a number of different types of roadways throughout the city, and these are generally classified based on a number of different characteristics into these functional classifications. The majority of roadway miles in the city of Sandy Springs, about 75%, are considered local roadways. Abernathy and Roswell Road, also known as State Route 9, carry the highest volume of vehicles among the local road network. However, as you might expect, I-285 and Georgia 400 carry more traffic than any other class of roadway in the city of Sandy Springs. In terms of the number of lanes, you can see the distribution here in the map. There are a few major roadways that have 4 or more lanes, and these carry most of the vehicular traffic within the city of Sandy Springs. And they include roads like Abernathy Road, Peachtree Dunwoody, and Roswell Road, among others. Among streets that are classified above minor roadways, or what are known as local streets, half of these are 2-lane facilities, and just over a third of these roadways are wider than 4 lanes. Looking at the freight network is another important consideration as we think about the future of transportation in the city of Sandy Springs. The city sits at the crossroads of 2 major regional truck routes, I-285 and Georgia 400. Roswell Road acts as a parallel to 400, providing redundancy to the north-south movements, truck movements within the city of Sandy Springs. And this benefits not only the city, but also the North Fulton County area, as well as the larger metro Atlanta region. We also want to think about the safety of our roadways as we evaluate transportation now and in the future. To do this, our team looked at crashes that occurred on roadways throughout the city between 2015 and 2019, and this includes crashes between vehicles as well as those that involve pedestrians or bicyclists. And during this time, almost 70% of all surface street crashes within the city occurred on one of 10 corridors that are shown here on the slide. It's notable that more than 25% of all surface street crashes occurred on Roswell Road, which is substantially more than on other roadways, as you can see by the percentage listed. Diving a little bit deeper into safety, we also like to look at patterns of where serious crashes occur. So those are crashes that result in serious injuries or fatalities. So during this time, between 2015 and 2019, nearly 120 crashes on surface streets within the city resulted in a serious injury or a fatality. Concentrations of these crashes include areas along Roswell Road between 285 and Johnson Ferry, as well as the area around the intersection of Abernathy Road, Peachtree Dunwoody Road, and the Mount Vernon Highway here. And also a little bit further north near the Glen Ridge Road interchange with 400. Another important component of the transportation system is what we often call ITS, or Intelligent Transportation Systems. This is a network of technology applications and devices that help the city manage traffic and improve safety at intersections. It includes things such as traffic signals, fiber optic cable, CCTV, and Bluetooth. And the city has invested in a robust network to improve conditions along roadways and maximize the usage of existing transportation facilities. Things like fiber optic cables are typically located along regionally and locally significant routes that carry the majority of traffic in the city, as you can see here on the map indicated by the blue lines. Investing in these technologies allows the city to dynamically and actively manage roadways through remote monitoring, adjustments to signal timing, and other measures. These investments also help position the city for implementing emerging technologies such as connected and automated vehicles. Active transportation is another element of the overall transportation system. This includes facilities for biking, walking, as well as for lightweight, low-speed devices such as electric bikes and scooters. The city has several facilities for these modes, including sidewalks, bike lanes, bikeable shoulders, and sharrows, or shared roadways. In addition, shared use or multi-use trails such as the Abernathy Greenway are designed for both bicyclists and pedestrians to use at the same time. The city currently has a sidewalk master plan as well as a trail master plan, and there are several programmed projects such as side paths on Mount Vernon Highway, the Path 400 extension, and others that will improve multimodal connectivity throughout the city. We also like to think about the importance of transit and the role that transit and public transportation plays in transportation throughout the city. Transit in Sandy Springs is provided by MARTA with bus and rail service, as well as commuter express buses and perimeter shuttles. MARTA provides local bus service along major corridors throughout the city, and these provide connections to the rail stations. Express is a commuter-focused service that provides connections between park and ride lots throughout the region to major job centers, such as those at Perimeter Center and Midtown and Downtown Atlanta. You can see the routes here for both sets of services on the map. And with that, I think we're going to pause for questions. It looks like we have one. Give people a minute or two to enter any other questions that you might have at this time. So the question that we have at the moment is really a comment about how we display the number of accidents as opposed to the overall rate of vehicles using it. So comparing the total number of crashes and the number of vehicles using the roadway would give you kind of a rate of crashes based on the traffic volumes. And that's another component that we do look at as we contemplate and work on these transportation plans. We chose to just show kind of the locations of the crashes and the relative concentrations throughout the city for the sake of tonight's presentation. Caitlin, is there anything you want to add to that?
No, we will be uploading the existing conditions report, which is a more thorough review of the transportation system and existing conditions. And that'll be coming along to the website in the next few weeks. And so you may be able to dig in deeper into the safety statistics in that report.
Yeah, that's a great point. Okay, well, if there are no other questions at this time, we're going to go ahead and move on to our next section of the presentation. I'm going to turn it back to Jessica to give an overview of the goals and objectives, and then we'll get ready for our interactive catchphrase activity.
Thanks, Erin. All right. So for the Sandy Springs Transportation Master Plan, we've identified several preliminary project goals. These are, of course, in draft mode, which we're hoping to get some feedback from you all on. To give you a little bit of background on where the project goals came from, we did a really thorough review of guidance that's out there from the Federal Highway Administration, the Federal Transit Administration, as well as looking at Georgia Department of Transportation planning goals and objectives, Atlanta Regional Commission's planning goals and objectives, and of course, last but not least, a myriad of transportation efforts that have gone through the city of Sandy Springs, as well as kind of a more regional look through the North Fulton Comprehensive Transportation Plan. But before we show these to you, we wanted to just quickly highlight the way that we have structured some of these preliminary goals. And so, of course, we have the goal, which is our results that we want to achieve in the long term. And so you'll be able to see the 6 very succinctly in the next slide. And then we have a list of objectives. So actually 1 objective per goal. So it's just a quick description of what the goal is trying to achieve and how we would like to achieve it. And so the 6 goals are here. They are not in any particular order, but what I'll do is I'll go through each one of them and then let you kind of read through the statements for you all. So the first goal that we have listed here is safety. And the description is to promote a safer transportation system for users of all modes. The second is mobility and accessibility, promoting an interconnected and efficient transportation network. The third is economic vitality, promoting economic development through targeted transportation investments. Land use and transportation integration, where we want to make sure that the transportation system is context sensitive and supports surrounding land uses. The fifth here is maintaining and optimizing the system. Again, the statement reinforce, maintain, and strengthen the existing transportation network. And the last one that's listed here is well-being and environment, where we're looking to support healthy living through quality connections to the built and natural environments. And so as we go through the next catchphrase activity, what we would like you to do is kind of have these in the back, have the statements in the back of your mind, because we'll be asking you to input kind of the first thought and the first phrase that you think of when you think of these preliminary goals. And so what we're going to ask you to do is open up a separate browser, go to menti.com. And if you input the code 475352, you'll actually be able to enter comments, and we can actually see them come up live on the screen here. And so we'll give everybody a few minutes or an appropriate amount of time so that everyone can make sure that they can go onto Menti and get this activity going. And I'm going to pass the baton off to Erin.
All right, so for those that have joined the online polling through menti.com, you should see a screen right now that says, thanks for joining us. We'll get started with the catchphrase activity in a few moments. So we'll just give it another minute or so to get everybody signed in. And just a quick note, you can do this through a mobile device or a tablet, as well as your computer or laptop or whatever it is that you're using. So as we go through this, we're going to ask you to enter short words or phrases that come to mind when you think about each of the goals. And we'll go through them in the order that Jessica reviewed them earlier. And then you'll be able to see all your results pop up in real time. As you go through, you may need to advance the screen on your other device just to make sure that you're keeping up with the questions as we move forward. So once you hit submit for your answer, you'll see them pop up on the screen here that we're showing. So the first one is to describe transportation in Sandy Springs today. And we're going to go through just two kind of warm-up activities to get you thinking about the goals. So we see the responses coming in. You can see them moving around on the screen. We've got too much construction, car-centric, relatively available, car-focused, gridlocked, car-heavy, congested, just okay, crowded, comfort. Got just a few more responses coming in. You're able to submit multiple answers. So if you think of a second word you want to enter, please go ahead and do that. It's good. We have more responses than we have attendees. Y'all are paying attention and participating. That's great. So we see single occupancy, challenging, inefficient, anti-pedestrian, too many cars from Cobb, Roswell Road, one person per car, narrow lanes. This is very good. All right, so with that, let's get the last couple answers in here, and we're going to move on and ask you to think about transportation in Sandy Springs in the future. So advance to the next slide, and then if you can put in your keywords and phrases that you think of when you think of transportation in the future. So what you hope it might be, what you expect it to be. So we see some hopes and aspirations, walker friendly, free shuttles, enjoyable. We see some things people probably would like not to have. We see no roundabouts, non-vehicular, underground, electric, walkable, pedestrian friendly, bike friendly. Lots of answers coming in. We'll give just another minute or so, and then we'll get ready to move on to the goals. I see teen van service, mass transit, traffic managed by police, synchronized lights. They're good answers, great. Okay, so with that, let's go ahead and move on to the first of our goals. Sorry if I cut you off there. We're gonna try to cover these 6 goals in a few minutes so that we can leave time for our last few wrap-up items and questions and answers. So thinking about safety, the first goal statement reads, promote a safer transportation system for users of all modes. So this means improving safety for people who are walking, biking, driving, using a stroller, using a wheelchair, whatever mode it is that they're using. So enter in the first words that come to mind when you think about promoting a safer transportation system for all users. Lots of answers coming in. We've got pedestrian lights, crosswalks, designated turn lanes, no right on red, connected vehicles, wide bike lanes, reducing traffic, stop signs, pedestrian lights, slower speed limits, more sidewalk, better sidewalk. Good, we'll just give another couple seconds here in case anybody else has other ideas for safety. Better lighting, a couple of crosswalk mentions. Very good. All right, let's move on now to the next category. Mobility and accessibility. So thinking about how the city can promote an interconnected and efficient transportation network. So mobility is really about how people get around and making the system efficient and operate well, using various different modes. And accessibility is getting at ensuring that everyone can have access to the transportation system, whatever that is, making it usable for people who walk, drive, take public transportation, ensuring that the system is well connected, that everyone can use it. So we've got greenways, microtransit, synchronized lights, connected sidewalks, greenways, shuttle service, constant shuttle service, we're up to 11 responses. Filling in missing sidewalks, autonomous taxis, interparcel access, driverless shuttles, bicycle lanes, walkable, municipal parking. So your input to each of these goals will help our team as we think about, developing, doing our assessment of the existing, of what's out there now, but then also as we think about, going forward, the future recommendations. So we'll be taking into consideration everything that we're hearing and seeing tonight. All right, we'll move on to the next category. We're going to talk now about economic vitality. So the statement reads, promoting economic development through targeted transportation investments. So think about the linkages between transportation and economic development, identifying the right investments in the transportation system that will support the economy, helping people have access to jobs, enabling people to get to attractions and destinations. So what can the transportation system do to support economic vitality? Interconnectedness, I think that's a common theme. Shuttle service linked to MARTA. Office complex shuttles. Better parking options. Pedestrian only roads. Shuttle to MARTA trains. Mass cross-county moves. Shuttles from Cobb. Better parking options. Path-like connections. TOD, so that refers to transit-oriented development. Bicycles. We'll give just another minute or so, let folks enter in any other ideas they have. Incentives for carpool, I saw pop up. Great, just another couple seconds. We've got 3 more goals to get through. I see telecommute incentives just popped up. Bike paths to businesses. Rapid bus service. This is all great input. All right, so moving on, we're gonna talk about, let's see. The next one is land use and transportation integration. So the transportation system, ensuring the transportation system is context sensitive and supports surrounding land use. So land use is a term that describes kind of how we use land, whether that be agricultural, commercial, residential, or institutional. Could be parks and green space as well. So thinking about making sure the right kinds of transportation investments and facilities can serve the surrounding land uses, whatever is in that area, if it's in a residential area, if it's in a commercial area, or otherwise. So thinking about what is needed to serve the land uses in a given area. More open spaces, green spaces, parks, multi-use development, walkability, less density, affordable housing, walkable communities. Again, we see TOD for transit-oriented development. Don't sacrifice residential areas, more MARTA. Live, work, play areas, more hiking paths, shuttles, less office and commercial, shuttles, greenways, saw bicycle friendly, still have a few answers coming in, so we'll wait another minute or so. Put parking underground, maximize mixed use, less multi-use. So a wide range of ideas here. Free parking, more restaurants. Improve school access. Great. All very good input. We're gonna get ready here to move on to the next goal. So this one is about maintaining and optimizing the system. So thinking about reinforcing, maintaining, and strengthening the existing transportation network. So what can be done to make sure the city is keeping up with maintenance and making sure the overall system is stronger, more resilient, taking care of the investments that have been made, strengthening the existing network. Smart intersections, smart lights, keeping roads paved, free of potholes, better lighting. Sidewalk improvements and coordination of lights. Increasing Atlanta connections. Paving streets. better signage, keep streetlights working, removing speed bumps, okay, a few more seconds. A couple of answers are still coming in. Great. All right, we'll move on to the last goal statement. The last one is about well-being and environment. So the statement reads, support healthy living through quality connections to the built and natural environments. So here we're asking, what is the relationship between transportation and health and the environment? How can the transportation system support healthy living? What comes to mind when you think of the connections between transportation and well-being and the environment? So lots of emphasis on walking, more micro parks, sidewalks, encouraging walking, walkability, protecting bicyclists, bike lanes, reducing pollution, paths to parks, station aesthetics. I assume that might mean MARTA stations. Protecting residential areas, ensuring trails are lit. Improved transit, separate bicycle lanes, less construction, electric van shuttles, hiking trails, pedestrian connections over 400, greenways through development, safer traffic conditions, buffer zones for sidewalks, path connected to neighborhoods. It's great. We have 42 responses already. Very good. So we have about 12 minutes left or so. I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to Jessica to wrap things up. Thank you all very much for your participation.
Hi, everyone. So as we wrap this up, we wanted to kind of walk you through our online survey that's actually available starting today. We want you to help us to champion the Transportation Master Plan efforts. Send the link that you see here to your neighbors, to your friends, through social media channels, and help us get the word out there that Sandy Springs is doing a Transportation Master Plan, because public involvement is critical to the process. And especially during this time with COVID, we want to make sure that we are getting as much input as possible. And so I'm actually going to run through some of the screens that you'll see on the online survey, because even beyond the questions that you went through with the catchphrase activity, it would actually be great if you all also went to the online survey to answer some additional questions. And so quickly, the first MetroQuest slide is an introduction to the survey itself. It takes about 5 to 10 minutes, depending on how kind of detailed you want to give us your responses. So the first survey screen here is ranking your top priorities. So it's the same 6 project goals that you've seen, and asking, what are your top 3? Based on your feedback on the top 3, we run through kind of a similar catchphrase activity here. And so you'll see that in this screen. The next screen is the one that I'm actually most excited about. And so it's a Map It feature, where you can actually drag and drop specific markers onto the map and zoom in and out of Sandy Springs to tell us where your concerns are, where you're seeing lots of congestion or safety issues, where you'd like to see additional crosswalks or bike paths, multi-use paths. So you can actually tell us specifically where you'd like to see some of these improvements. And this is great because when we start to really go into project development, we can make sure that we're back checking to say, okay, this is where the public has given us a lot of feedback. Let's make sure that, we're taking all of this into account. And so that's a really great feature for you all to give us really specific geographic feedback. The last screen here is just to ask about some of your travel habits. And so, where you're traveling today, how do you travel today, whether it's driving or biking or using transit. We want to know a little bit about how you move within the city, as well as just, your home and work zip codes to understand, again, where your travel movements are. As we move forward into the Transportation Master Plan, it'll be really important to start really understanding that beyond just the technical data that we've seen so far. And so before we close, I wanted to go through some next steps. And so again, the MetroQuest survey is open as of today. It will remain open until July 14th. And so it's just about a month, where you all can give us more additional feedback. We will be finalizing the existing conditions report, and Caitlin mentioned that earlier during the presentation, but that will also be going onto our project website, and you'll see that link on the next steps page as well. And there's a bullet here that says ongoing multimodal assessment. I gave a little bit of a highlight of what that was in the beginning, but that's where we really, take a look at where the gaps exist, where the needs are for the transportation network Sandy Springs, and start to identify projects to look forward to recommendations. And then before we go to Q&A, Caitlin Schenkel, she introduced all of us to the Zoom platform and to the planning process. She is our city project manager and will remain the primary contact for the city. And so if you all want to email us about the Transportation Master Plan, give us input, or if you want to be put on a, just on a listserv that if we have announcements, we can send out to you. We would be happy if you send us an email at that address. And with that, I'm actually going to pass the baton off to Caitlin.
Great. Thank you, Jessica. And thank you, everyone, for attending and participating in our activity. We got a lot of great feedback through that process. So I really appreciate you guys being active. Like I mentioned, this is one of many opportunities to engage during this process. And so we'll be coming back to you towards late summer, early fall to re-engage, hopefully in person. If not, we'll have some more of these online tools, but we'll definitely try to figure out a way to do some kind of in-person activity as well. With that, I'll wrap up and we'll move into the final Q&A. Dan, would you like to go ahead and manage the Q&A?
Sure, no problem. I think we have a couple questions and I'll let Caitlin answer them. So the first question is, how does the current T-SPLOST current projects fit into the master plan?
Great, that's a good question. So as part of the master planning effort, we will be developing a project list for the city moving forward. And this project list will consist of current projects that we're working on, as well as new projects we identified through the needs assessment. And so since these projects are still ongoing, we will definitely incorporate them into the plan because they're already funded and they're underway.
The second question is, the shift to virtual workspaces is expected to continue post-COVID. Will any traffic studies be updated in a post-COVID environment?
That's also a really good question. And so right now, traffic patterns have definitely changed since before COVID occurred. We will not be updating any traffic studies at the moment, but it is something that we'll be looking at towards the future. So this may be a temporary change in traffic patterns, or it may be more permanent as people shift to telework. But that is really unknown right now, and so there'll be no updates at this moment.
And the last question, what is the purpose of the master plan for laymen?
Yes, so the purpose of the Transportation Master Plan is really to do a thorough needs assessment of the city's network, and that way we can kind of understand what projects are needed long-term and short-term to really address those needs. And the other key element is having public engagement sessions such as this one to get feedback from the public to see, here's what to share what we've been seeing, and then getting feedback from on the ground as well from you guys. And so it really is to develop a project list at the end of different efforts that we can work on as a city going forward to really improve the network overall. All right, any more questions, Dan?
One more question, I'm sorry. Are there plans for Roswell Road between Hammond and south of 285?
So at this stage in the master plan process, we have just gone over existing conditions, which is what was shared today. We have not identified any projects as part of the planning effort. And so as we move forward in the planning process towards early fall, late fall, we'll start having some ideas of different projects and that may be in the location on Roswell Road between Hammond and south of 285. So stay tuned. All right, great. Well, thank you, everyone. I think that's all for our Q&A as well. Again, if you have any questions after this meeting, feel free to reach out to tmp@sandyspringsga.gov, and stay tuned to the project website, as we'll be posting more engagement opportunities as we move along through the process. Have a good evening.